Howdy, this episode of Pipeline Things, again, a lot of fun. Let me ask you, how do you like your steak? Are you an A1 person or are you an A5 person? Do you know what's at stake? Because that's what we get into here when we talk about IMU, bending strain. It's a great follow-up to the previous episode. Christopher does a great job kind of stealing the host role from me and asking some really great questions. A lot of fun. There was a bell ring in the middle of it, all sorts of crazy shenanigans. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Good afternoon, morning, whatever time zone you might be in. Welcome to today's episode of Pipeline Things. I am your host, Thing 20. This is my co-host, again, not lesser in prominence, but in stature, Thing 21, Thing 20 Fun. What is it now? Is it Thing 21? Is it Thing 20 Fun?
I think it just depends on the environment. You know, I think if we're here, maybe it's Thing 21. But out there, I think it's Thing 20 Fun.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get any verification of that, but you know, that's my position.
Well, hey, I'm excited to be with you guys today. I think we have a fantastic episode following up on last episode. So, before we get too deep, I do want to make a note that you really, before you jump into this episode, we got a little deep last time in IMU. We're going to back that up for you a little bit, only at a high level. So I'd highly recommend you listen to the previous episode before you jump into this one and we get deep. But before then, man, oh gosh, the weather has been fabulous this week, Chris. Are you enjoying Texas spring? We only get about maybe 4 weeks of this.
I will admit, we just got back from a beautiful place, and surprisingly, the weather is fantastic.
Year round at that place
in Houston, but I have no doubt that wherever it is you go, you always have weather-related problems. I hope you don't bring that to Houston.
The fabulous thing is, so we were in Cali this week. It was amazing. The weather followed us right up to the plane, right? We were sitting in the airport with hail falling behind us. The plane was delayed. It was real. It was real. And then we landed in California, and
everything was great.
Yeah.
So
apparently if I want to escape weather for me, my family,
go to California,
my vehicles,
and then bring that weather back with us.
And we did.
So what was some of the best parts of it? What did you enjoy?
I know you thought it was funny, and I know I nerded out pretty hard on the Bay Bridge, the San Francisco Bay Bridge.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, from a structural engineer, and many of you may not know that I'm a structural engineer, that thing is a masterpiece. The fact that it was designed by hand, and I'm sitting there looking at those
he did get really excited. He said, "Can you believe these engineers calculated all this stuff by hand?"
Dude, we turned a corner and we came out and we were in the fog, and before I realized all of a sudden we were on the Bay Bridge, and I was like, "This is like a Golden Gate Bridge." Yes, and I just wanted to stop the conversation because it honestly, it's an amazing bridge. It is beautiful in architecture. It is amazing in engineering. So I think honestly, next to the clients, who I loved, that's probably the high point for me. What about you, man?
I had 3 big takeaways.
3? I just had 1, but you got to outdo me, so go ahead.
The company we had was fantastic.
We did have some great
y'all know who you are, both around, the Southern California area and around the Bay Area. Thanks a lot for the time. The second was, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it was a combination of the 2-hour-long walk we had on the beach where you and I got to spend some time together and have deep conversation.
Let's be clear, we were walking because you didn't get there early enough to rent the bikes.
Okay, but still, it was a fun walk.
We almost got hit by skateboarders, we almost got hit by runners, taken out by bikes. We should have been on bikes, instead we're getting taken out by people on them, but yes, I agree.
And Sausalito, that place is fantastic in the Bay Area. Sausalito was great.
Amazing.
And the third one was A5. A5. So,
help me.
I think of A1 and I think of A5. When you think of A1, what comes to mind? That's
A1. Are you talking about the steak sauce? The stuff you put on steaks?
Exactly. A1, you think of steak sauce. What about if I say A5?
I'm hoping it wasn't a bad mimic of A1 because I'm not real sure right now. I don't know. Help me out. What's A5? Thing 25?
Dinner. A5 Wagyu steak. Come on, bro. Do you think they did that on purpose? A5 is so good you don't need A1.
That's a thought. Maybe that is what it is. Yeah, that dinner was pretty fantastic. I have not had Japanese barbecue that style yet. It was good. So yeah, for the audience out there who's referring to Wagyu A5 steak, which is like the grade of the steak, it was pretty good.
I'm sure we're gonna find a correlation between
getting hit on the beach and A5 steak.
No.
Oh,
I was gonna tie this to our topic of, you only get out of the ILI data what you want, right? And so I could kind of see how if you don't run the right technology, if you don't ask for the right thing, right? So let's say you're not specific about what you want from the data, or it's not in a specification, you could end up with the steak that you got to put A1 sauce on. But if you're really specific and you know what you want, you're able to get Wagyu type steak results out of what you're looking for.
I think it just had like one of those epiphany moments. I can see where that might flow here. That's a good time to segue, right? We can talk about what's at stake.
Bingo.
SCAK later on. But let's jump. Let's take a few steps back for the audience and let's go back. So we ended. This is definitely going to come up. I'm smiling now because I like where this is headed. For the audience out there, just real quick, a couple of the feedback. Thank you guys. Every Wednesday, Thursday, I'm getting text messages from you guys, and I appreciate it. I want you guys to know there is a YouTube video link for every one of these. So if you prefer to see or watch Christopher and I be goons in person, you can do that. Or you can listen to the audio thing, but there is a YouTube link out there. And so, again, just letting everybody know that. But let's take a step back. So we got into IMU, which is like, oh man, that's a hot button topic for me. I have to restrain myself. Yeah. We really did, I think, a good job of introducing IMU. Got a little bit deep when we were talking about dead reckoning and whatnot. But we left the audience with a few key points, why you should run IMU more than once, right? Because I think there's a lot of operators that they think it's one and done.
Yep.
I think we explained that. And then towards the end, we got into takeaways in terms of what does the deliverable look like. And I mean, we really only barely opened up Pandora's box there, talking a little bit about the spreadsheet versus the strains. And that's what we're going to pick up today. This is going to be an episode that's going to be focused on using IMU bending strain and how you help that manage the threat of weather and outside forces so you don't waff it up.
I love that one. So for the listeners and the viewers on this episode, in the previous one, it was a segue to the hyphenated dirt merchant where we leaned in on IMU data. And we talk about things like what is strain, why is it that controlled bending of the pipe is okay, and why you can have higher strains, whereas when it's uncontrolled and it's maybe because of an outside force, then it becomes an issue. And how we're able to use IMU data, that they're not all the same types. You got to know what technology's on board, if it's a MIMS or a fog system. All those neat details are in the previous episode. So we're going to play off of those today. And I think where I might want to start as a recap is how about a series of questions, Rhett? And we just kind of bang through a couple of them.
Okay. You're going to start back with bending strain? Where are you going to go first?
Well, let's do this. If we want to do a bending strain assessment and we have IMU data,
yes,
whether it's an old data set or a more recent data set, do we need AGMs to perform a bending strain assessment?
That is probably the single most common question that I've gotten. And so let me be clear. Right? So I think in the last episode, we divided up pretty well between between bending strain being used to determine the trajectory of your pipeline. So physically, where is it located geospatially on planet Earth?
Yeah.
And then determining what external loads or bending strain may exist on the pipe. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
When we talk about trajectory, dead reckoning, where is my pipeline? AGMs matter. When we talk about the local curvature on the pipe, they don't matter at all. And so the truth is, you can perform bending strain on a pipeline that has no AGMs. And in fact, it's done pretty routine. Like offshore, they don't have AGMs out there. It's quite common. You can run 50, 75 mile line and you can run bending strain. The assessment will still tell you, hey, where do you have places where the pipeline might be bent? What it won't be able to do is tell you where those places are on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Right. So, hey, my pipeline, you have a very high anomalous bending strain event.
Yeah.
At this location in the pipeline as a function of Odo, but I don't know whether that's, in Spring, Texas, or whether or not that's
or we can go another
Jersey
way.
Village.
It is IMU, which is normally associated with a GPS coordinate and a map.
Yeah.
And so, if you tie the location of it and you didn't account properly for where it is on the planet Earth, and you're looking at it, it could be, half a mile off the right of way, and you're like,
Exactly.
what's going on here?
Right.
And so it kind of makes sense
That's
for an AGM can say, hey, yeah, I have a bending strain feature here, but you want the AGM to make sure, it's close to where it actually should be.
Yeah. By the way, did you catch that Miss Producer yawned during that dialogue? That's how interested she was in that. I think that's a key that we have to step it up. We have to bring more energy. So
hold on. She is in school, so she probably had a late night. She is in school.
Okay, we forgive you.
All right, master's degrees. I'm getting a little salty about that. I feel like everyone around us has a master's degree except me.
Chris, you have an earned master's degree in in customer excellence.
Okay, that's what it is. I need a certificate for that. Okay. All right. Second question. Let's say you do get a bending strain report, and it has a ton of features. Maybe not a ton.
No, a ton.
Let's say tens of features.
Yeah.
I think in the last episode we talked a little bit about thresholds and what matters. What do I do? If I got 100 features or so?
Yeah. So this is common, right? I think this is one of the number one reasons that operators have opted to do nothing with their bending strain reports. And by nothing, I mean literally. I've had operators I've talked to that said, yeah, I ran that once. I got a report back. I stuck it on the shelf because I didn't know what to do with it. Or alternatively, they get a report back with 100 features, and they just freak out. They don't know what to do. Yeah. So first off, I think it's important to recognize what you're getting in that deliverable. A lot of times, operators are very much in a mentality of looking at what they get in a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet gives you a couple of things. It's going to tell you the location of where that event happened, which is usually larger than most operators are used to because they've got a start and an end point. It might be 150, 200, 600 feet long for a feature.
Yeah.
Second thing it's going to tell you is what the peak strains are. And then you might get an analyst comment. The problem is the analyst can only say so much in that one little Excel box, which usually isn't very much. Behind that, there's usually a report that actually describes what that feature looks like in terms of out of straightness, horizontal, vertical, total strains. That actually has a wealth of information that can help you determine potentially whether or not that feature is anomalous because something is acting on the pipeline or whether or not it's constructed that way. So in that report, there's a whole bunch of additional information in the form of graphs that really help the operator understand what they should do.
So again, we wanted to use some of these questions to kind of recap, but also put some depth on last episode. In last episode, we talked about thresholds and areas of concern. Can you quickly summarize those two first again?
Right, so let's go back. So first step is, again, understand you got that spreadsheet. It's got limits. Understand that you've got a report. And if you have trouble interpreting that report, what do we always say? Call. Get help. I can spend 30, 45 minutes and help you understand how to read those plots and take what you need from them very quickly. But then we get into strains, right? And so when I talk about strain limits, there's a reporting threshold, 0.125. That is equivalent to about 37,500 PSI on the pipe from Hooke's Law. All of that to say that it's about 70 to 80% of SMICE for a nominal pipe, right? That's your reporting threshold. You do not need to take action at everything at the reporting threshold. The same way I tell operators, Chris, are you going to take action on every 10% MFL call in a run? No. Because you know that a 10% deep corrosion feature doesn't matter. That's a reporting threshold, though. It tells you to be aware. The same is true for bending strain. So that's what your 0.125% means.
So when do we care?
When do we care? So let's say everything between 0.125. I can tell I'm not answering this question fast enough from you. You're giving me the get to the point look, Rhett. This producer hasn't yawned though, so I think I'm still okay. We're going from A1 to the A5. I'm getting to the A5. I'm just not there yet. All right. So between 0.125 and 0.2, that's your elastic range.
Okay.
Be aware. Like, you want to be aware of your corrosion features? Know it's there. Maybe mark it. Maybe look at it for a reinspection. Maybe be aware if you're going to do a dig in that area. 0.2 is kind of the threshold where you need to start paying attention as an operator. By paying attention, it doesn't mean you're going to dig it up. But that means that maybe you start looking at historical data. Maybe you start integrating other data sets. Maybe you start trying to understand the cause. Maybe you start looking at a prioritizations. Between 0.2 and 0.3, I'd say that's kind of your awareness zone. Once you get a 0.3, that's where you need to start paying attention, right? 0.3 to 0.5, it gradually goes from, in my opinion, I think yellow to red. And where red is a, hey, stop, you really do need to take some type of action. That may not mean shutting down the pipeline, but it means that you really do need to take some integrity action and understand what's going on there.
So let's dig in just a little bit, and then maybe we'll take a break.
Already? Are you tired? I wore you out with one explanation. The audience, you can judge whether that was helpful for you.
You said horizontal, vertical, and total strain are found on the visual reports.
Such a great question. You did such a good job there.
So, and then you give us what I will call a percent strain of concern. Walk us through. Do I need to focus on total strain? Do I need to focus on horizontal strain, vertical strain? Help me understand what I need to pay attention to there.
Thank you. Right. So again, this is that's a great question. So strain magnitude, which is what I gave you, is related to the total strain. That's important because again, on those action levels I gave you, it has some bearing. But then you need to understand what the orientation is, and that's where horizontal and vertical comes in. So pipelines, if you look at the construction of pipelines, there's an order of magnitude more vertical bends than there are horizontal. Because pipelines typically run long and straight, and then they intentionally change direction. But they have to go over a lot of terrain changes, which is why you end up in so many vertical bends. What that means in terms of bending strain is you universally will get an order of magnitude more vertically oriented bending strain features that are typically associated with construction, where you're having to fit the pipeline to the ditch, right? And then the horizontal ones occur much less likely are much less likely to occur as a result of construction. It's more rare for the construction crew to need to deform the pipe horizontally to fit construction than vertically. So you have to look at all three, the strain magnitude, then you look at your direction. Your vertical strains, you typically place less emphasis on unless you know you have something happening there, like a sinkhole, or you had some type of a depression that formed in the ground, or you're at the toe of a landslide. But when you see horizontal strain calls, those are the ones that you definitely want to have your radar going up. So to give you some idea, if you look at the distribution of strain calls, so let's say I have 100 strain calls. About 90% of those will be oriented in the vertical direction. And 10% will be oriented in the horizontal direction. Now, if you look at which of those are actively moving, 90% of the horizontal calls are typically actively moving, while only 10% of the vertical calls, right? So again, and think about that for a moment.
So it's kind of like the Golden Gate Bridge, right?
Whoa.
Right, so it's pipe. I mean, it looks like a pipeline that's in suspension, right? I mean, that's what it looks like.
I told you you were going to.
And you know what? I feel real comfortable driving across it.
That is actually true, right? So when you look, you don't realize that what the suspension lines hang off of is a giant pipeline that's actually unsupported for hundreds of feet, but it's behaving as a catenary. What that tells you is that pipelines, when they're properly designed, can take a tremendous amount of tension, particularly in a catenary shape, which is how that's designed. Pipelines don't typically go into a catenary shape, but it does mean that a lot of times when the conditions are right, they can take a fair amount of strain.
So you left out total. So I feel like I feel like what you said, I really want to pay attention to the horizontal strain based features above 1.25% strain.
0.125.
0.125. That's right.
That decimal point. Decimal points.
When do I care about total?
Again, total is sort of your first line of defense, right? So you kind of sort them by total strain, right? And that tells you the magnitude, tells you how concerned you need to be, right? How bad might this be? The orientation then tells you maybe whether or not you need to amplify that concern. So I'll give you an example. If you tell me you have two features with 0.3% strain each, and you say one of them is in the vertical direction, the other's in the horizontal direction, I'm going to prioritize the horizontal one over the vertical almost every time. Until I go, then my next level is I may go look at those plots. And maybe I start looking at the plots and I understand like, oh, there was a prior excavation here, near this this vertical one. Oh, and it was a pretty deep excavation. There's a high likelihood they might not have backfilled correctly. See, so then you start getting deeper into the data as you integrate the history, and it may redirect you. But from a first level, total strain sorts them out. After that, orientation is the second level. Then below that is where you start integrating data and the plots that are in the bending strain report to help you take action.
I feel like if I go back to the A1 steak sauce to A5 quality steak, you just kind of gave us like a menu. This is kind of like the order in which you start at appetizers and you go to.
I'm going to tell you to buy A5 every time, baby.
And then it's like go to butter. So next I want to talk about, when you need to start carrying and an idea of how high is high bending, but maybe we should take a break.
You do? You called the break this time.
I think we should take a break.
This is kind of like a shift. All right, we're going to take a break and hear from Dr. Chris Alexander. To you, Miss Producer.
Hi, my name is Chris Alexander, and I'm president and founder of ADV Integrity, and we are the proud sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast led by Rhett Dotson and Christopher DeLeon. In that podcast, they're going to be talking about things like integrity management, pretty much anything related to pipelines, including regulations, technology, and anything that you would need to know. They're also going to be talking about current events. For those of you that don't know anything about ADV Integrity, we're a consulting company. We do full-scale testing. I'm actually here in the lab, and really high-end engineering to serve the pipeline industry. And we would love to hear from you, and really excited about being sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast.
Welcome back, audience, to Pipeline Things. We are knee-deep in this discussion on bending strain, and we're going to continue. I promise we're going to finish with some really good advice for you. I'm excited, me personally, this is my baby, where this episode is going.
You're going to end up with an A5 episode. Yeah!
So the audience has no idea what just happened, but you just heard a bell in the background. So if you've watched us on LinkedIn, you know when we ring the bell, that means that somebody just got work. So first, I want to say thank you to whichever client it is that just gave us work. We get excited. And then second is, it was probably David Futch. The Futch factor is probably running around. He probably just got another metallurgical analysis.
Oh,
heck, you might ring the bell.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah,
Futch.
congratulations.
I don't know if it's you or not, but congratulations.
I'm not bitter about the competition we have going on or anything,
it's
Futch, but well done. Yeah, no, so, okay. All right, back on track.
Okay,
that was exciting. I can't believe that happened in the middle of the episode. That's so fantastic.
So question, right? So the idea was, so how high of a bending strain is too high? So we talked about vertical strain, horizontal strain, total strain. How high is too high?
Man, you know, operators ask this question, and I'm gonna do a Futch factor thing and say it depends. No, I'm actually not. What I'll give you is kind of a distribution. There was a paper I presented a while back, and we looked at the distribution of bending strains. I'll say this much. Bending strains greater than 0.3% are not common. They're only about 3 to 5% of total calls. So if you get above a total strain of 0.3%, you're already in the top 3 to 5% of calls. You get above 0.5, it is exceptionally rare, right? And you say, Rhett, does that mean I need the panic button? I'm going to tell you it depends. You need to understand the conditions of your pipeline to know whether or not that 0.5% level is critical based on the materials in your pipeline and the geometry of your pipeline.
So, quickly, right, without making another episode, they get something above 0.3% strain. They say, you know what, this is outside of my expertise. They pause, they ask for help, they give somebody a call.
Yep.
What does that type of effort look like once they're trying to understand if they have a situation or not?
Yeah, so what we do is we understand the critical strain limits, right? Mm-hmm. So when you talk about pipelines, you got two failure modes you're concerned with. One is on the compression side. If you bend a pipeline and it's thin wall, so a lot of your gas operators here, you're going to buckle it. Right. Okay. If you create a buckle, the problem is buckles have a high potential. They become very high localized strain events and can develop cracks. Right. So buckling is bad, but that's on the compression side. Right. So think about like when you take a straw. It's not the perfect example, but if you bend the straw, it kinks. Think about it like that. And cracks eventually. Yeah. And then you're trying to suck up your strain. You can't.
Terrible.
It is. It is terrible when you crack a straw. And the paper straws just kind of like fall apart now. But that's
I prefer paper straw because it doesn't leak as much.
It doesn't leak, but then the whole
there's actual suction. You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Come on.
All right. So the other way that pipelines fail is unfortunately due to girth welds, right? And so what happens there on the tensile side is girth welds are almost always your weak link, and the girth welds will just part. And that's probably the most common failure mode due to geohazards, and where the industry's invested a lot of time trying to understand. But that the range at which girth welds fails varies significantly, Chris. It can vary as low as 0.3%, and to be honest, as I mentioned in the last episode, several orders higher than that.
So I want to now talk about integrity management. Okay, so in integrity management, we need to gather information. We want to understand risk. We want to understand the threats. We then want to do an assessment.
And I didn't answer your question.
We want to mitigate. And then we got to do it all over again.
Well,
so I think it's fair to say that ILI equipped with IMU is a great way, as a lagging indicator, meaning it's telling you what's present. It's not predicting what's going on.
Yep.
It seems like it's a great way to assess the current state of a pipeline.
Yes.
And I think it's also fair to say, after talking to Alex McKenzie Johnson, the dirt merchant, and about what bending strain is trying to accomplish, that when you have forces acting on the pipe,
yes,
that's what you care about. It's not so much the movement, it's more about what forces are being exerted on the pipe
and the strains,
and then the strains that are produced on the pipe. So hook, line, and sinker.
And then one step beyond that, and what the capacity of your pipeline is, right? So you asked me what to do. You need to determine your capacities, and then you need to judge your pipeline in relation to the capacity, right? So, hey, my strain is 0.3%, my capacity is 0.42, I'm good. But it doesn't stop there. The next question you have to ask is it stable? Yeah,
so that's integrity. That's immediate integrity assessments. But then the concept of future integrity reassessment intervals come into play.
Right.
So is it, what are your thoughts about a 7 years reinspection cycle for IMU? If you get a call, you said 0.2 to 0.3% total strain, you need to be aware. So can I inspect every 7 years?
The question I more commonly get is, when do I have to take action on this one? And that's a much more challenging question to ask. Both of them are actually pretty challenging.
Well, let's focus on reassessment.
You know what? Let's take the reassessment part off, and let's take about how do you manage the threat.
Okay.
The truth is, if you have an active threat on your pipeline, you have to find some way to provide continual management, right? So when we talk about geohazards, if it's a geohazard that's happening in an episodic manner, which means that it's not gradually, right? So you don't have a landslide that's moving. Alex McKenzie Johnson gave a good example where you might be moving a half an inch per year.
Yeah.
Right? If it's continually in very stable manner moving in a half inch per year, you can deal with that. But a lot of other events are just episodic, boom. And those are more difficult. What that means is 7 years is probably not going to fly for you, to be honest. And maybe even taking action in a year might not fly for you. You have to have some means to provide continual integrity assessment. That might look like inclinometers. That might look like site walk downs. That's where other things that you can do more easily and more readily on a closer interval come into play.
So that goes into your P&M type, your prevention and mitigation. Let's stay focused on ILI.
Let's do it.
So if we look at a threat like corrosion or cracking, the time between inspections matters because of the tolerances associated. Do we have to worry about IMU tolerances if, say, we wanted a pig every 6 months or every year?
Tolerances don't play too big of a role. So again, I'll be honest, there's another paper that we published where we looked at the repeatability of IMU at PPIM, and the repeatability of IMU is really good. The tolerances don't play, because to be honest, if you have a 0.34% bending strain, for instance, and it's plus or minus 0.02, 0.32 and 0.36 are essentially the same, right? When you think about a feature, whether or not it's at 0.32 or 0.38 doesn't matter to me as much as the cause of what's going on and the likelihood of whether or not it's going to progress in the near future.
So let's move into pipeline movement, right? So let's we could just pick a scenario because there's a ton, right? Let's say an operator says, I have a legitimate threat here. There is movement acting on, there's external forces acting on the line, and I'm going to have some kind of interval. We don't have to pick an interval because you said the tool's accurate enough to where you could do it every month if you wanted, it sounds like, right?
Yep.
Cool. Pipeline movement. Talk to us about thresholds and points of concern. Like, at what point do I need to report pipeline movement? What does that reporting threshold look like? And when do I care?
So, I mean, first off, we're using the term pipeline movement. I'm not super excited about that. Okay. I actually prefer strain change, because the tools are better predictors of strain change than they are of pipeline movement, just because of the way the integration scheme works and the inaccuracies there. They are good if you have strain change and things happening. They're good at telling you how much things have moved. But that's not the primary metric you use to evaluate. You start with whether or not the strains are changing first, and then you look at whether or not the movement is in line with what you expect. That's how you help discern things. But again, going back, so I don't like to use movement as a metric because it's really strain that matters at the end of the day. And again, when you talk about reinspection intervals, Chris, it's everything from regulatory requirement at 7 years down to I've had operators running every 3 months. That depends on your threat, how concerned you are about the pipeline, and really what you can put in the pipeline. If you want to run every year, that's doable. If that's what the integrity threat costs you.
And we've seen that.
And we have absolutely seen that. I've seen every quarter. I've seen once a year. There are a lot of operators because of that.
And it's fair to say that's vendor agnostic, right?
It is vendor agnostic, absolutely. And to some extent, I would say it's even technology platform independent, right? So again, we've seen everything from IMU being integrated onto cleaning pigs now, to running on a full combo tool, to running just behind a caliper train. Point is you have to understand your system and the threat to know what that reinspection interval looks like. And if you determine, I don't have any confidence or I can't access it, I don't want to use site walkdowns, I don't want to use LiDAR, you might be looking at inspecting that segment with some type of a IMU mounted train every quarter or every year.
Okay, so thresholds for strain change. When do we care?
That question is really tough to answer. So first off, you have to get away from movement. Everybody wants to talk about how far can the pipe move. Just throw that in the trash. It's useful to know how much it's moved, because that is something we have an intuitive feel for, but there is nothing tied to says how far you can move based on the tool running. It's how much strain change.
And that's because,
how
again,
rapidly.
just because the earth is moving or maybe the pipe is moving doesn't mean that matters, right? It's all about the strain on the pipe.
It's all about what's happening on the strain,
Got it.
right?
So can you give us a rule of thumb for threshold?
The rule of thumb is if you're detecting it as strain change, you should pay attention to it. And I'm going to be real clear there. Now, again, you might detect strain change in the vertical direction is a whole bunch of excavations. You shelve those because you know it caused, right? So once you got strain change, understand why and deal with it appropriately. If you did a whole bunch of vertical strain change and you're like, oh, I dug there, oh, they built a road crossing, shelve it. Right? If you get to horizontal strain change and you're seeing measurable strain change, now you've got a time in between inspections and you got a rate. That's a starting point, just like corrosion growth rates. It might not be a good rate, but it's a starting rate. I say you need to begin managing at that point.
You stop and call someone for help.
There you go. Or if you know it's changing, you take action. So for me, if you know it's changing, you need to pay attention.
I think we've done it.
That's where you want to stop?
I think we've done it. So I guess what I kind of want to get to is it's, if an operator has maybe forgotten about, how and when to use IMU for not just knowing where to go dig, but how to start using it as part of a geohazard program or, just continuous improvement to understand if a threat is present or not, whether it's previous data or current data, what tips can you give our listeners so that they don't end up having to put a ton of A1 sauce on their steak?
You want me to give them the A5?
But
you want me to give them
it's that Wagyu,
that medium rare buttery just hits right in the middle. At least Miss Producer's not yawning on that. I think she's thinking she's going to eat A5 steak this weekend. That's what I think she's going to happen. She's done a good enough job for her. We should give her some A5 steak. We probably should. Talk to Chris Alexander about that. So tips. Here's my tip. If you're on the cusp of starting or launching a bending strain program, so the first thing is you need to be able to get the data right. Yeah. And this is a situation where you've got one of two things, right? So every year, whenever you're going to your ILI vendors, in your specification, I am adamant that you need to request the high resolution IMU data because that's the easiest time for you to get it. That's the data you need to do all these assessments we're talking about.
Yeah.
Independent of whether you intend to do those assessments, Chris, get that data so that you have it on your servers as an operator and you can do what you want with it. Analyze it yourself, pay somebody else, call me, do whatever you want to do to analyze that data, right? That's number one. Number two is if you need to go back and get your historical data, and a lot of operators find themselves, unfortunately, because the geohazard finds them, and they're like, oh man, I need to go back and start assessing my system. You need to start talking to your vendors, right? And make the job easy for them. Tell them how many you're going to assume, bump them together, Don't come at them, I need one, I need two, I need three. Hey, put it together. Guys, I need all of my IMU data. Is it available for these 50 segments or these 10 segments or these 20, however many it is? Yeah. And, I'd say work with them, for them to go back and get the historical data. Sometimes it can be a challenge, but in most cases, it's a couple of hours of work for the ILI vendor to go and pull that data and get it over to you. And it's easier if you give it to them all at once and give them a time frame when they can deal to it. But start getting the data.
So as a wrap up, so that they don't have to go and listen to the previous episode, this IMU data, or like I like to call high resolution mapping, what does that data request look like? What is it again?
So what you're looking for is high resolution data on a 4-inch increment or smaller, but most of the vendors are pretty close, and they're going to give you pitch, azimuth, roll in some cases, and then they'll give you the geospatial Latin long or northings and eastings on a 4-inch increment. So it just looks like a giant CSV file. And so when you zip that up, it's easy to store. It's you don't need a viewer to look at it. There's nothing special. It's just a big CSV text file. After you take that step, my next advice for operators is honestly don't wait until the geohazards find you. I would say if you're operating in or near almost any part of the United States, the threat is probably there. At least start ruling it out. So at a high level,
Richard reminded us of that, right?
Yep,
whether it's hydrological, river crossings, whether you think there's no movement because you're in a desert, whether you're on the side of a foothill or not, a fault line, these things are all over
Right.
the place.
And so my advice is, just again, as an operator, recognize the WAF threat's there. Regulatory guidance is growing on it. And I think you're going to see it increase. And it's easy to take a step, Chris, and start just saying, hey, I want to prioritize these lines.
Yeah.
Maybe this is my highest threat one. Maybe I want to screen for bending strain on that one. Or maybe if you have already done a site assessment with a geotechnical and they said, hey, we've looked at your whole right of way. Here's the 3 or 4 sites. It's pretty easy to go and look at the bending strain or what's going on at those sites. But my point is, start to get your feet wet, because if the geohazard finds you, and then you're scrambling to get data, you're scrambling to get up to speed on bending strain.
At that point, you just waft it up.
You did, and it's just a challenge. My heart breaks for those operators, and I love helping you guys, but it's like drinking from 3 or 4 fire hydrants at once. So that's my advice for you.
Awesome. Well, this was fun.
It was fun.
This felt like an A5.
I still, the bell did it for me, man. I came back in the second half, and the bells got me excited. I'm gonna go find the fudge factor now and ask him if that was him that rang it.
It might have been us.
Well, we didn't ring it. You think somebody rang it for us?
It depends who got the PO. Maybe it went to someone's inbox.
Yeah.
If it was for us, thanks. We love you guys.
We'd love you guys no matter what, and remember, what's at stake here? Your A1 or your A5? Go for the A5 on geohazards. There's a lot more there. But Chris, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I look forward, guys. We have more to come. I think y'all are seeing this vein. We have some more guests in the queue that we're going to bring on. It's going to be fun. I think Alex McKenzie Johnson got such a great reception. We might have the Dirt Merchant back for another round.
We might have to have him back. And before we, because obviously we'll wrap up, if you guys have questions, find ways to get that to us, whether it's a previous...
Oh, you mentioned questions. It's fabulous. Hey, be on the lookout. A lot of you guys have asked me questions. We're actually going to be putting a poll up, or a method for you guys to submit questions to us. And I think we're going to do an open mailbox episode where we just go through. And I don't know if we'll do it blindly, because that kind of scares me. But we're going to have fun on an episode in the near future where we take your questions about any of our previous episodes, about my issues with lightning, whatever it might be, whether or not Miss Producer actually had the Wagyu A5. We'll take it all. That's a good point for us to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Pipeline Things. Mom, thanks for listening. And to Alex McKenzie Johnson's mom, thank you for listening.
My mom's listening too.
Moms, thanks for listening. For everybody else that's out there, it's been a pleasure being with you. I'm Thing 20. This is Thing 21. We will see you 2 weeks from now.